All right, and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are going to be reviewing the movie Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. Now, I know some of y'all out there are probably thinking to yourselves, "Hey, how come you guys aren't reviewing Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny?" Well, Lee and I can safely say, are very fond of our eyeballs, and we didn't want to submit ourselves to that torture and then punish ourselves afterwards. So we're going to review a movie that is actually bearable. Lee, how are you doing this week?
Good. I'm doing well, and I will say, I'm still interested in seeing the Indiana Jones movie as much as I would say a lot of the backlash has been. I'm still interested in it, but it is
even after Crystal Skull.
Even after Crystal Skull, which I absolutely did not like, but you just have to kind of see it to its conclusion, right? I mean, like, we've already seen 4 movies with Indiana Jones. There's just a part of me that's just like, I just want to see the ride end, even if it means everyone's vomiting on it the whole way down.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, I guess that's fair, because I mean, they've sort of drawn you in at this point, and you're like, well, maybe I should see what all the hubbub is about, even if I may resort to gouging my eyes out afterwards. I don't know, but yeah. So today we're taking a look at Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, and I gotta say, I mean, for a movie that's based on a very popular game, I kind of enjoyed it. What did you think about it?
Yeah, I was totally like, this is gonna tank hard. And to be granted, like, box office wise, it didn't exactly do what I'm sure they were expecting of it. But as you pointed out, something that unfortunately has a very checkered past, right, with the other Dungeons and Dragons movies that I think are universally panned as being hot garbage. This one was a very pleasant surprise. I have to admit that I enjoyed this throughout the whole thing. I think the only thing I will say was the ending really didn't do a whole lot for me, but I think the journey I found to be quite enjoyable. So I'll give them props for having just a nice blend of, fun fantasy with some, enjoyable comedy and just an overall fun romp from beginning till about 90% of the end part there.
It's kind of like it kind of reminded me of when we reviewed the Super Mario Brothers movie. Remember from a few weeks ago?
Yeah.
It was like, well, you go in, without very high expectations, and you come out thinking, wow, it was actually pretty decent for for what was given to us.
Yeah.
But
never would expect it in either one of those movies. So absolutely right.
Yeah,
it is a real shocker.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and dive into the movie. So Lee, you're telling me before we started recording, you said that you saw this roughly around opening, or a little bit after opening day, around March, April-ish, right?
Yeah. I definitely I saw it pretty early on. I couldn't tell the exact date, but I think it was probably like very early April. So it's probably about 3 months. And with everything else that I watched, I feel like let me go ahead and check it out again. I remember, like I said, the majority of it was just like, let me just make sure I have a little bit of a refresher here.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's someone that just rewatched it again. It held up really well. I found myself, chuckling throughout the whole thing. So I think it's something that I could easily see kind of continuing to be one of those movies that people enjoy in the future too.
I mean, I watched it probably like I think I saw it last weekend. And when I was watching the movie, it kind of reminded me of the Adventures of Baron Munchausen. You know that movie from the 80s, that was directed by Terry Gilliam. Because I watched Munchausen a few weeks prior to watching Dungeons and Dragons, and that that opening scene when they're in the prison, where where Ed is basically giving his what was it? I guess his testimony or something. He's talking about all the people in his group. It reminded me how Munchausen was like telling people, "Oh, I had this one guy, he could run super fast, and this other guy who who was a pretty good sharpshooter, and this guy here, he had, I think it was like the strong man who could blow, pretty fast. And then I was the leader of the group. That's what it reminded me of, because Ed had all these, like, special associates who had a particular ability. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. So
Yeah, I will say, while I've not seen that movie, so I have literally no reference for this, I will say, at least in the Dungeons and Dragons, I thought it was an interesting way to introduce the backstory, right? I think, everyone's like always like, backstories tend to be kind of awkward in how they insert things. It was kind of interesting that there was a direct tie to how he was presenting his, with him, being at pretty much like a parole hearing, in this Arctic jail that they're at.
Well, I was gonna say, I thought, what did you think about that? About the beginning scene where they kept asking about, I think it was Master Jonathan or something. He was that bird guy. I kept thinking, oh, so was he like an associate or an accomplice of them?
That's what I thought the whole time too. I was just like, oh man, like this guy's gonna get them out. And then I thought that was such a funny moment where it's just like the only reason they cared about it was because he could fly, and that totally took me through a loop, because I was like, the whole time I'm like, oh man, this is like maybe someone that was on the crew previously, or like owe him a favor or something, because like they act like, oh man, this guy's really a part of this. I really want him to hear the story. And the whole time I'm like, yeah, well, let's see what happens. Like, how are they connected? And it's like, they're not connected. He can fly. And it was just a convenient way for them to escape. I thought that I got a huge laugh out of that after it, because he brings it up so much time during the backstory sequence. And then you find out it's just nothing. He's just a useful tool for them, which I just was, it took me by surprise. I was not expecting that, and I think that's what made the humor more enjoyable in that sequence.
It was a pretty good misdirect too. I thought
Yes.
I thought that was a good way. That was a good way to kind of like, have us think one thing, and then they're like, oh, well, this is actually isn't what they're all about. They just want to escape from the prison. So let me ask you this: what did you think about Ed's backstory, about him being a harper, and what happened to his family? Did you think that was kind of like old hat, or did you think that was kind of like
it doesn't really it doesn't cover any new ground, right? I definitely, it's not exactly something where, I mean, we've seen all these beats before with all the characters. I just think that the way that they're able to portray it and the way that they kind of do it is interesting. And, I think, there's kind of that, end of the second act where, everyone's kind of like hitting their low points and everything, the very, the typical second act issues. And it was really interesting because we know more about his character, because, we have this whole backstory. And it is one of those things where it's just like, what, holy shit, like he's really had a struggle. Like, he has this, very doting wife who is like very, very pure of heart. Like she's just always smiling, always happy, just a really like kind of
she's got a very sunny outlook. I'll say
yes,
that.
yes,
But
yes.
but then the question becomes like, does she know what her husband's doing? Because
Well,
he's basically working as a spy. I mean, like, at no point did she just stop and say, "Hey, you know, we've got a kid, right? And you do piss off a lot of people." Like,
Yeah, that's true. I guess it's one of those things where maybe it was viewed as like, even though he's maybe doing something shady, it's for the greater good or something like that. I mean, it's just like, police officers, I'm sure, have similar things, like people that go undercover and stuff. So, I don't think there's anything to me that was too crazy with it. But I think the fact that we kind of see his decision that, he wants to support the family ends up being a huge downfall, because he steals that treasure, which pretty much puts, a target on his family's back and ends up with his wife getting killed. I could certainly understand his character and why he wants to do what he wants to do, because, he has this loving wife that he feels a whole lot of guilt over, because I mean, he in essence was the reason that she got killed. So I could certainly understand his character and his motivations, which I think was honestly, even though not anything new, was it provided enough character motivation that I could really get behind what he was doing, why he was doing it, and it gives you that hope at the end that he's going to be able to put this all together finally.
I mean, do you feel sort of sympathetic for Ed because of the fact
Yeah.
that he screwed up royally by thinking he could try to like steal this marked treasure, and it comes back to bite him in the ass?
Oh yeah, absolutely, right. And you know, I think it's one of those things where it's what he's doing is obviously not right, right? And they kind of give the, oh, it's like the Robin Hood type of explanation for it, like, oh, you know, we only stole from people that were gonna miss it. So they do try to cop out with that. I mean, you know, regardless of your beliefs with it, he was, you know, doing this stuff negatively, but in that same token, like, I think the way that Chris Pine is able to pull off the character, you could certainly empathize with what he's going through, and the fact that, you know, he caused his wife to get killed, you know, caused all this discord with his family. You know, he's trying to hold on to his daughter that we know is kind of like a roller coaster with the whole situation. But all in all, it was a great way for him to be able to kind of work on it and kind of deal with the situation. And I think by the end, I'm obviously rooting for the success of it. Like, I want to see everything work out really for all the group, minus maybe one character that I don't care about. But
Yeah, we can dive into
I,
that in a little bit. Yeah.
yes, Simon. But yes, I think overall, you know, I enjoyed his character as I did for most of the cast. I enjoyed them.
Yeah, because I mean, like, because with most movies, I mean, you kind of get this feeling that you're supposed to root for them because they're quote unquote the hero of the story, but you really don't have that much of a connection with them, or at least you find their motivations, somewhat quasi sympathetic at best. Whereas with Ed, it's like he knows he's screwed up. He admits it several times, and he's trying to find a way to make it right. And it doesn't it doesn't matter what your overall opinion is. I mean, at the end, you kind of have to feel for the guy because you're like, yeah, he is, he is trying to do right, not just for himself but for his daughter, and try to give himself a sense of normalcy. So, and this pretty much goes for all of the other characters too, because you sort of get a backstory into what's going on with all the other characters as well. I mean, Holga. I mean, with the exception of Holga, I feel like some of the other characters you can sort of understand what's going on. Holga and, well, I guess we could include Simon in there. Simon is just an outlier. I have no idea what's going on with that guy. But with Holga, I feel like she's she's there and we care for her because she's the surrogate mother that Kira that Kira doesn't have with her own birth mother. What did you think of Holga's character?
Yeah, I mean, I thought Michelle Rodriguez did the character well. I mean, she obviously, I feel like Michelle Rodriguez is kind of typecast as that badass character.
I was going to say that. I was because, would you know what? Like, she sort of reminded me of the character she played in Machete with Danny Trejo. Like, that's what it made me think of.
Yeah, no. I mean, she was just, a badass character. And, I always kind of enjoyed, and I guess, like, talking about maybe some of the action sequences, especially around her, was, I thought that they were overall well done. And I think what I enjoy a lot from seeing a lot of these sequences is not only did they have, like, strong choreography, but I like the fact that the characters feel vulnerable. Either that's, emotionally vulnerable, like, Ed is, or like physically vulnerable, like obviously all of them are. But like when Holga fights, like there's times where, she's getting thrown around. She's kind of, going through these battles. It's not like she's leaving anything unscathed. Obviously, right. She's a very strong character, and she obviously sticks out compared to like some of the other people out there. But it wasn't something like, she was just there and nothing ever happened, right? Like, I felt tension when she fought because I knew that even though she was probably stronger than everyone, she was probably going to eventually win. There
Mhm.
was going to be something where she was going to have some challenges. And I appreciate the movie for wanting to depict something like that, because I think we see so many times nowadays where, we have to have characters that are in these battles and there's no tension, because it's like, okay, cool, we're just going to watch one character kick another character's ass, and that's the end of it. But in this, it's just like, you know what? Hey, like, I don't know, how hard this battle is going to be. I don't feel like they're going to lose, but I'm not going to sit there and pretend like I don't have some form of engagement with that. So I think they did a good job with that, especially with Holga, which I think that was a lot of her character. She's kind of like the tank of the group. She's like a berserker kind of.
Yeah.
I thought that was, as I said, I think it fit her character well, and I think Michelle Rodriguez has been doing this type of role for, it feels like, some time now, and I think she kind of excels in that area, right? If you get typecasted as something,
You might as well do it well. So
yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm with you on that one, just because of the fact that a lot of the fight scenes you see, most of these characters come out unscathed, but everybody else is either dead or they've got brain damage or something. But it just makes it, in spite of the fact that it's well choreographed, it also feels realistic too, because obviously
Yes.
if you're going to go into a fight, especially if you're fighting a bunch of armored dudes, I mean, you can expect to come out with like with a few scrapes and bruises. So that's what so I'm with you. I appreciate the fact that that one, they choreographed the fights pretty well, that it flowed seamlessly, but they also kind of interspersed it with with moments where Holga will either drop her guard, or something will happen where she kind of gets overpowered or kind of outmaneuvered, and she kind of gets injured along the way.
Yeah. Yep. Which is realistic, right? Like, a lot of times, like, her versus a group of guards is just like, reality is that she's gonna have some issues, and I'm glad. Like I said, they don't show her as, I mean, obviously she's a badass and she does some incredible things in it, but it feels like it's on par with kind of the universe, right? Like, we know, like, especially everyone that's played like D&D, right? Like, you're gonna have some characters that are just have great strength, and they're able to kind of do greater feats than what you would be expecting. And, to me, it was right aligned with it. And, she obviously had some moments of vulnerability there in the fights, which, I thought they did well with.
Well, speaking of vulnerability, I wanted to I want to hone in on that one particular scene where she goes home and she meets I guess her ex-husband, I guess.
Yeah.
Or that, and really, really, I thought that was a pretty tender moment, because they're just having this little reunion, and then I'm just gonna call him Bradley Cooper because it's Bradley Cooper. His new wife walks in, and she's like, "Well, does she make you happy?" And he's like, "Yeah," and she's like, "Oh, that's good." And I was like, "That's a pretty potent scene," because you can sort of sense that vulnerability, because she still has feelings for him. And you could sort of feel that feel that she may have hurt him at some point in the past, but they both moved past it. I mean, obviously he's moved on with someone else, and she's happy to see that she's moved on, but you can tell there's a bit of lingering feelings between the two.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a very nice, a very adult way of depicting that, right? I mean, she took, and I think a lot of this is like the characters taking ownership of making changes. I think that's what all these characters go through, except for maybe, I would say, Doric maybe has kind of the weakest. But I would say for Holga, I totally agree that, I thought it was a very mature way of going through it. Like, she went through all of this, pretty much like left her tribe and everything to be with Bradley Cooper. So, she went through all of that to be with him. And then, she did shady things. And like I said, it just kind of felt like a very real type of situation where, he didn't feel comfortable with what she was doing. And, they made the adult decision, or at least one of them made the adult decision, like, this is not right for me. So it felt like a very, in a Dungeons and Dragons movie, of all movies to do this, right? It felt like a very adult way for them to take care of the situation. it did kind of feel very like forced into the story. Like all of a sudden she's like, well, I gotta see him, and I'm like, okay, I get it, but I also don't get it. But at least when they did it, it was well executed. Even I
Yeah,
felt it was a little like
it kind of got
kind of
shoehorned
forcing
in
it just for
there.
the sake of her having that moment.
Right, right. But I mean, at the same time, because you remember early in the movie when they're at the parole hearing, Ed does mention that Holga kind of stepped in and helped him raise Kira. And I thought,
Yeah.
and I thought, well, it's obviously her, stepping into the role, but I kind of at the same time I kind of feel like she's trying to make up for, she's trying to do good. She's trying to make up for the past mistakes she made when she was with Bradley Cooper's character.
100%.
Because I mean, like, you kind of get the feeling like there were a lot of things that she could have done right in that relationship that she didn't do, and that's what led to that moment. And now Holga's like, I got to do this, because at least that way I'm able to, not only at least make peace with myself and also show, prove to myself and to others that I'm not a screw up. I can actually do some good, and it kind of and it ends up paying dividends by the end of the movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now, just just a side just a side point here. Was Bradley Cooper a hobbit? Because you notice that huge size difference between the two. Because she's not a
Yes.
giant; she's a normal person. But it's like,
I guess so. I don't like. I'm sure that they mentioned like maybe what he was in the movie, but yes, obviously, he was a very short character. So, whatever
because
they
he's
were in universe, yes.
because he's hobbit sized. He's living out in the country, and he's living in a cottage. Like, those are all like, in my mind. I'm just having Tolkien vibes like ringing in my head about that. Um, but I do want to move on to the other characters. Doric. Now, at first, I thought she was a human just based on the exposition, because she said she was raised by elves in the Emerald Enclave, and she's developed this sort of hatred towards humans. But when I look at her, I'm like, I mean, she looks pretty small. Like, is she like an undersized human, or is she actually like a half elf, or what is she?
Well, I believe didn't they say she's like a druid? Like, and I know that's like maybe not the race. Like, I know like druids kind of like a
Yeah, it's more of
class,
a
you would
class.
say.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, she definitely had like kind of like the ears of an elf, but I don't remember if we got anything specific. I'm sure it came up, but she definitely was. I mean, they at least kind of explain her purpose or what she was ultimately trying to gain out of it, which is, we see, I guess, Forge is pretty much like destroying the forest, so she's like, I don't know, Ferngully. So
Yeah.
wants to wants to get back at a Forge for all the destruction of the forest and everything that's going on. So
But I mean, like, because you said it yourself a few minutes ago, like her reasons are pretty much flimsy. They're not the strongest compared to Ed and Holga's. Just because throughout the entire movie she's really only interested in one thing, and that's it. Is to protect the Emerald Enclave. And once that's done, she's like, all right, well, I've done my thing. I'm
yeah,
I'm pretty much good.
yeah.
Um, did you feel that they should have done more with her character, or was it just one of the situations where, like, this is pretty much all we can do with her?
Yeah, I mean, I think with a lot of movies, right? So you don't want it to get so bogged down that everything has to have a character beat, right? I think, we see some definitely strong ones from, who I would consider like the two main leads, right? I feel like they kind of get a lot of that screen time, and we kind of see Simon go through some stuff. So I would say, like, out of the four main people, she's probably the weakest from a story beat side as far as what she wants to do. So she kind of has this, idea, which, I mean, we could see is important for her. Obviously, everything's being destroyed around her, and she obviously has a strong reason for doing it. But yeah, it definitely is. I always say the weakest of the group as far as what they're wanting to get accomplished, and I think she, as a character, I mean, she was probably the most fun to watch just because of all the shape shifting. I think like the way that they handle those sequences was really, really cool. But yes, as far as like from a character goes, she wasn't exactly lighting up the world or had the most depth of anybody that was in there.
Which is ironic considering the fact that she has the most power sets out of all of them. Really.
Yes. Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, she turns was an owl bear, right?
Oh, yeah.
So she can sit there, she turns in all this stuff, and like I said, I mean, those sequences were a ton of fun. Like, I just love all the imagination around the characters. So even though maybe like from a character development standpoint, she's not getting a whole lot of that respect, but I think from as far as just how she gets depicted, I mean, she was the most fun to be able to watch. Like, you're always just wondering, like, when they're, trying to figure out, like, the vault stuff, and you see, that whole sequence where she starts off as a fly, and then she transitions into, the mouse, and then, she kind of goes back into her normal form, and she's in the pseudo armor, and then it transitions into, I think she was a mouse
deer.
again, because then she climbs up the wall, and then she's a bird, and then she becomes a cat, and then a deer, or that weird animal, and then a deer. Like, it was just like it was all over the place. I'm like, holy shit! Like, it's such a fun, imaginative moment to see her kind of go through all that stuff. I thought it was just a ton of fun to be able to watch. So I think where maybe we see more, character development from some of the characters, I think her opportunity to shine was just her being able to kind of flex her abilities.
Right.
So I think like, I enjoyed her character in a different way, but I still enjoyed her overall.
I mean, really, the only development that we really see is her relationship with Simon, and that kind of leads us into your least favorite character, Simon, who well, let's keep it clean here. He's a wimp, basically. I know I know before we recorded, I used a little bit more adult terms to describe Simon. I mean, I was getting Michael Cera vibes from him like the entire time. Like he I mean, if you remember those movies from like the mid 2000s, like Superbad and all that, he just reminds me of that, that nervous teen with the squeaky voice. He's like, oh yeah, I know I'm not sure if I can do this. Oh geez, that's
Yeah,
that's pretty much Simon in a nutshell. Like, he's always doubting himself, and it's like, oh, I'm not sure if I can do this. I can probably do like this trick here, but oh, I'm actually doing this trick, but you don't really know it. Clever me. And everyone's like, okay, you're just stealing money from people. That's pretty much it. You're probably dying to tell us why you don't like Simon, so I'll let you rip on that one.
like, he needs courage, right? Like, he's like the cowardly lion from the Wizard of Oz.
Well, he needs more than courage. That's that. I mean, that's for sure.
So I mean, I don't want to shit on the character a ton, right? Like, I obviously did not enjoy him just because, like, I mean, granted, he does go through his character progression, right? Like, he finds that courage at the end when he puts on the helm of the dysfunction, whatever the hell the helmet was, and eventually he has that moment where he shows that courage. So I will give him that like he finds it at the end, but it just was it was just like it was 100% a one beat character where it's just like, I doubt myself, I doubt myself, I doubt myself, and some of that can be used as comedy. Like, I could get in some form of enjoyment over, okay, yeah, like, ha ha ha, like, yeah, I get it. Like, he's, kind of like pretty much a bad wizard, right? He's a bad sorcerer, whatever we want to call it. So he's not very good at what he does. And it just kind of is his one character beat through the whole time. And granted, he does finally find the courage when he attunes with the helmet, but it's just like it just felt very uninteresting. And I kind of got reminded of, his character from, or the actor, right? The actor played kind of a similar kind of like whiny, kind of like weak character in the new Jurassic Park movies. And like, I just immediately, when I saw it, I'm like, geez, I feel bad for that actor that he's like being typecasted as this, kind of like whiny guy that always, that's his character beat is, I'm just gonna be kind of obnoxiously whiny the whole time. So, but yeah, I would say out of the kind of the four main people, right, that kind of makes up our little party, his was definitely the one I was just like, I really don't enjoy you a whole lot, but at least he has his moment. And then like kind of when they go into their final fight with the red wizard at the end, at least he's not like sitting there being useless. So I at least could get some enjoyment out of that part at least.
So let me ask you this: the entire time in the movie where he's trying to like find confidence in himself, I kind of get the feeling that's them trying to make us sympathize with Simon. Did you?
Oh yeah.
At any point did you feel like, okay, I can sort of feel a bit for the kid? Like, did you get any of that, or were you just like, God, this is just so infuriating? Like,
I would say initially, yes. I think it would have been nice to like maybe see more about like why he struggles, or maybe there's some type of like mental block that was causing the issue, like maybe some type of past trauma that would have caused it. I thought that would have been more interesting. Especially because like there's all this stuff with like his great grandfather, right? Or his three greats. I don't know how many greats.
Yeah,
like
he sees him in the helmet. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, when he's trying to tune the helmet. So like it would have been interesting if like maybe like he failed his family and that's why he's struggling with it, and the fact that he's communicating with his great grandfather. Him communicate with that, I think adds like an extra level to the whole thing. That not only am I trying to tune this, helmet, I'm doing it to, kind of break over this barrier that's causing me to just not be a very effective magic conjurer. So I think there was ways they probably could have tweaked the story a little bit to make it more enjoyable. Because like the whole time it's like, I get it, he's a wimp. And then like, we kind of see at the beginning, and then later on it's like, okay, you're a wimp. And then, we kind of get to the, part where he's actually trying to tune it. I'm like, okay, he's a wimp. I get it. You don't have to force feed it to me anymore. I think there was just maybe some things they could have tweaked with the story that's like, oh, cool. He's weak, or he doesn't trust himself because he screwed up something in the past, and him overcoming that while him dealing with, maybe some type of family trouble that would have been the catalyst for all this. You could have had like a 2-for-1 thing where it's like, oh, him being able to have the moment with the grandfather who ends up being him or something. Like it was really just him trusting himself. I think that there was a lot of ways that maybe they could have done that would have had more impact on, I think, or at least that's how I feel. They could have had more impact with it if they maybe changed or gave us maybe a little bit more of a backstory on why he's so average at what he does.
Because they sort of hint about that when when he tunes into the helmet the first time and he sees his great ancestor. So when I was watching, a part of me was kind of like, well, come on, flesh it out. I want to see what exactly is into that. But but they kind of just leave it at that. And
yes,
well, I guess while we're on the helm, the thing that kind of frustrated me was the fact that they spent all this time, emphasizing the fact that you've got to tune into this helmet because we need it, and then we never hear about it once he tunes into the thing.
That's true. Like he does have his moment, and I guess like I don't know. It's kind of funny that we see like a good chunk of the movie. And actually where we meet another character, right? Zenek, right? So we kind of meet him during this journey for the helmet. And it is almost easily very forgotten that they got the helmet because, you have Doric that's like trying to break in another way. And she's pretty much able to do that. So it's almost like, okay, cool. Like the helmet wasn't really needed. It was just kind of like a side quest, but I guess it kind of gave us some laughs with another big character in the movie.
Well, especially when they went around was it the graveyard or something? They were digging up all these graves,
Yes.
and like you know what, it made me think of that scene from the first Hellboy movie when they had to break open a grave to find where Rasputin was hiding. What did you think about that particular scene where they're like resurrecting the dead and they kept screwing up? And it's like, are you sure? And it's like, yes. Does that count as a question? Yes. And the guy goes back to being dead, so they keep digging up like all these graves.
Yeah, I mean, I got such a kick out of that sequence. I was just like, I don't remember actually finding it that funny the first time. Like, I remembered it. I'm like, you know what? It was pretty good. Or I remember some parts of it that's like, you know what? It was funny. And then when I rewatched it just now, I'm like, dang, this actually is pretty humorous. Like, kind of like how they do, like you said, with the first one, they have all the questions, and then they're trying to find people, and then like you find out that like one of them got the helmet, and then they're digging up who they think has the helmet. But it was actually like the brother, and the brother like died because he hit his head on the bathtub, and he died during it. It's like, oh no, you're looking for my brother. I died unrelated, and it's just like, you know what, that feels on par for this type of journey. So. And then eventually they do kind of, get it at the end. And then, of course, the last person that tells them, about Zenek and how he was pretty much like, got promised the helmet, like they just leave him behind because they're like, okay, you got to ask him another question. And, at the end, he's like, that's only 4 questions. And then you just see them leave the guy alone. And, I guess he's just going to sit there in the grave until someone comes around to visit these people. And they're like, whoa, are you alive? And he's like, nope. And then he just dies again.
Yeah, he goes back to being dead.
He has to wait indefinitely for whatever someone shows up. But, I just think that it was just, it was amusing. That, and I think when they asked the 5 questions, they only did like 2. It's like, do you like cats? And he's like, no, not really. And they're just like asking like all these random questions. And
like, what's your favorite? What's your favorite book? It's like, oh, I can't read.
Yes. Yep. So yeah, they had some. It was. I did find that whole sequence was pretty amusing, all things considered.
So you did mention earlier before we started recording, you said that Xanax reminds you a lot of Drax, right?
I would say really with his...
What was his mannerisms anyway?
Yeah. Like, I think his little nature, yes. Like, that definitely kind of remind me of Drax and how, he's kind of very literal with everything, he says. And I think, like, he's depicted Xanax as being, like, a very, strong character. And obviously, once again, Drax is like that. Now, of course, Drax is a little bit more... I would say more airheaded, comparatively speaking. Like, I feel like Xanax is just kind of, I think the way he's depicted is just like, kind of being a very smart, altruistic character, but maybe just kind of being a little bit like tone deaf to everything. Whereas Drax, I felt like kind of divulged more into just being like kind of quirky comedy type of thing. But I do think there were some similarities there with, kind of how he gets depicted versus Drax, and just like I said, in kind of a very minor way.
Because I mean, like when I was watching the character, I kind of feel like he has to put on this serious demeanor because of what he witnessed as a child. I mean, I mean, especially given the fact that his parents were turned into revenants by the Red Wizards, I feel like, yeah, I can sort of see why he would have that outlook on life, given given what he had to witness, at such a young age. I mean, how did you feel about their quest into the cave to retrieve the helm?
I it was. I think that's just one of those things. It's just a fun adventure, right? Like, it's kind of like you going on a side quest, right? We have this overall mission. We have to be able to break in. We need this item, so we're gonna go on a side quest to go find it. And I think it was just like going through a dungeon that had a dragon in it.
A very fat dragon, I might add. Which I will say was a really, really nice touch.
Yes,
like I mean, when I saw it, I was like, you know what, they need to have more movies with fat dragons, because because I mean, given the fact that dragons eat people, I'm sure I'm sure I'm sure, especially given where he is, he's not going to have that much space to go and exercise. He is going to get a pretty chubby under there.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure they hibernate a lot, right? So it's just like, I mean, realistically speaking, if I eat hundreds of thousands of calories and I just kind of lay down in my cave, yeah, I'd imagine that some that's going to stick with me. So yeah, I thought it was fun. I have to admit, like when Zenek is like describing how they have to cross the bridge,
Yeah.
and like it's the most convoluted thing in the world, and it's just like the whole time, like I know the punchline, right? Like what it's gonna be, because it's like, oh, you have to go on the odd squares, and then you have to skip over every fifth one, and then when you get to the middle of the bridge, you have to go to evens, and then all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, someone's just gonna screw it up. And like the whole time, I'm just like waiting for it, waiting for it, waiting for it.
And then it's Simon.
Simon does it, and like I don't know why, but I still laughed at it. It's just like I don't know, like it was just like the way it was delivered was done in such a way, even though I knew the punchline, it just stuck with me, and I'm just like, you know what? That was still funny. Like I could just see him, and he says something stupid, like he said, like, "Oh, I didn't realize the bridge would start there." And I'm like, you know what? That kind of makes sense. Like he's not really like he's kind of on this like little area right beforehand. So I'm like, you know what? I can kind of understand that. Maybe he wouldn't be thinking like that. But
right.
I mean, it's kind of weird how they managed to not really subvert any expectations, but it still was delivered in a way that I still found amusing.
Well, I mean, which brings us to another point: the fact that once that's destroyed, Simon, Holger produces that little walking stick, and
Portal
Simon,
gun.
and then Simon's like, oh yeah, that's the hither thither stick thing.
Yep, which is just like I said, just a portal gun from either lots of shows that have been doing that or games that also have portals in them. So yeah.
Yeah. So why not have it in there?
Yep. Just throw it in there. And I mean, hey, this throws another fantasy element into, a high fantasy type of movie.
So those assassins that that we saw in the cave. I mean, obviously they were hired by the by that red witch, was it Safina?
Yes, Safina, yep.
Yeah, to basically go after them. I mean, I know in this particular case they're revenant, so they can't die, but they really weren't doing much because we only see them twice. We see them at once when when they greet Safina, and then we see them again in the cave. And even then they only do so much until Xanax pretty much like wipes the floor with them, and then the fat dragon pretty much finishes them off by eating them.
Yep.
Which I'll say, is a pretty good meal if you're a dragon, because if they can continue to, reconstitute themselves, I mean, there's no way you're going to go hungry after that.
That's true. That's a great point. That's a great point. But yeah, they were kind of, yeah, I mean, I felt like they're there just to help with the drum up the action. I just, it was like, okay, cool. You got these people that can't really die, and of course, it kind of falls into some of those goofy things where like he has this long battle with like kind of like the head one, and then they all kind of get revived at the same time. It kind of, you see stuff like that where it's just like, okay, like why are they all reviving at the same time? Like you killed one way earlier, and I mean, I guess it was a good way just to kind of get some action sequences, because I think the sword play was decent in that sequence. So I think it was just kind of throw out a little bit of reason just to be able to have this enjoyable kind of choreographed fight sequence with, a bunch of nameless henchmen, which I guess is, I mean, pretty much in any type of movie, there's always going to be a bunch of, nameless people that are out there. And this is how they decided to do that in the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
But I mean, they did have a fitting end. They got eaten by a fat dragon. So,
yes, they did.
So I want to circle back to Forge, who's the I guess we can say he's one of the main villains of the
yes.
of the movie, played by Hugh Grant. And can I just say, it just seems like over the past few years, Hugh Grant's kind of taken to playing these skeezy kind of scuzzo characters. what was your what did you think of Forge overall as a character? Because I mean, at the beginning, Forge promises them to, promises them a heist that can help them get that stone resurrection, so Ed can revive his wife, and then and then Safina does that spell which traps everybody in that time bubble, and then Ed just basically says, I'm not going to make it. Can you please look after my daughter for me? And he does, but he's sort of been gaslighting Kira the entire time. What did you think about him?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, he's a con man. Like, I think it stays true to the character, even though you kind of loathe what happens with everything. But I mean, the guy's a con man. He said it himself. And I mean, to me, he sticks true to what he's about, right? Like, he's not an altruistic guy. He's there to deceive people. And, I think the fact that we don't see him a ton, like, we kind of see him a little bit during kind of like the backstory sequence, right? We see a little bit of him. I think the fact that we don't know a ton about him kind of makes it more okay that we kind of see this change. So I had real no problem with the character. I think Hugh Grant like totally was just having tons of fun with the character, which was fun to see. I think he just sat there and ate the scenery, had no problem doing it, and I just enjoy being able to see how he interacted with everything. And like I said, I think Hugh Grant just did a great job of just depicting just really him being wild. There's like that's like when they finally meet up after they kind of break out / get taken out of prison. They kind of like have the meet up again, and then you find out that the Red Wizard is still with Forge. And there's that sequence where he's like drinking tea, and he asks the Red Wizard to cool it down, and she freezes her finger and sticks it in there, and you can kind of see him be like, oh, I didn't realize you're gonna stick your finger in there. That's disgusting. And I kind of like watched that, like, what, that's humorous. I like that. So I mean, as much of this character is kind of like a one trick pony, right? It stays true to what he is, right? I would imagine a con man would easily be able to deceive us. And as an audience, you could say he deceived us, but I mean, that sticks with who he is, right? A con man's going to do that, right? He's playing the long con. We see him do it countless times, and he's a guy that's out for himself, and he stayed true to that the whole time.
Because I mean, with con men, usually they're not going to be very sincere, but that one thing was that one speech he gives to Ed where he's like, it actually feels gratifying to have someone look up to you when he's talking about Kira. I was like, okay, that's actually one of those moments where he's actually being real. I mean, yeah, you find out later on he's just, he's doing this for his own self gratification, but the fact that he sort of finds, he sort of finds it fulfilling to being a father figure towards her. You're like, okay, yeah, he's still a con man. Yeah, and he's a piece of shit overall. But you can sort of feel for the guy in a way, because
in his own kind of awkward way. Yes, I do agree with you. I think in an odd way, he sees that. Of course, I would say his worldview of that is very warped, but I'm sure that someone that has lived a life of crime would probably have some type of interesting moral compass. Let me put it like that.
Right, but you get the gist of it. Like he's being sort of genuine,
yes,
at that
yes,
point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which then leads us to Safina, the Red Witch or Red Wizard. Can I just say?
Like
Say what?
Didn't like her.
I mean, there's really not much going for her. I sort of understand they want to have like that quiet, menacing villain, but my God, like how flat can you be?
Yeah, in a movie that I would say had a lot going for it, to me, totally dragged out when she was on the screen. It just was not interested. We know she's trying to help, some other bigger, badder guy that's, doing this spell and gonna do all this stuff. And, it just I felt nothing. Like it was, at least she was a character that we know was very powerful. And obviously, because she betrayed the crew the first time. We have we have kind of that additional incentive that we want to see, our group win. But her with everything else was just totally uninteresting. It was definitely, to me, it was the weakest part of the movie. Was just the villain was just utter crap. So I just was totally not engaged with it. Like, we've seen, this type of thing countless times. Somebody's doing something for a bigger, badder person. We don't really see it. And that's all that's really to her character. And that's it. So the only thing that she had going for it to me was, like I said, she had those powers. We know that she's a strong character that can kind of do all these things. But other than that, was just, to me, a total waste.
Because because with her, like she's probably the most cliched, out of all the characters. Because at least with the other characters, including Simon, you could sort of, you could sort of have a connection. But with her, it's like, oh, we definitely know she's a bad guy because she looks like a bad guy. What's her overall plan? Oh, it's to take over the world. Well, we have never seen that before at all. We have never seen a villain wanting to take over the world. That is new to me. Where have I been these past 30 years?
Yeah, not covering any new ground, and they definitely didn't do anything to make her interesting. Like, even the design was just like, like you said, like, she looks evil. Like, if I was like, hey, you have to go, point out an evil person in the lineup, I would probably point to, the bald chick, wearing all black, right? Like, that has the heavy eye makeup, right? Like, so it's just like, okay, yep, I think you're clearly depicting this character to me, but it just the whole thing, from just the design, motivations, just all of it was, I think, the weakest part of a generally good movie.
Because the movie kind of skews towards the fact that they want you to root for the heroes, and I think they do a pretty good job by giving us very complex heroes, but then the villains are pretty much one dimensional. Because Forge, he's pretty much just out to enrich himself, and Safina, well, she just wants to turn everybody into revenants. So So what did you think about the heist that they were trying to accomplish, getting into the vault to get that stone?
I thought the sequence was, it gave us a few different things, right? So we got like kind of that fun, kind of moment where, at least for Simon, he does go through that kind of like, he tunes with the helmet, he's able to get, in. So I thought that was interesting. Even I would say, like, even before, right, where they're coming up with the plan, right? So where they're breaking into the cart, right? So you're trying to break into the cart. I thought that was really imaginative. Like, they create this portal. They kind of put the painting underneath the carriage, and then like they kind of like break into it. I thought that was all super imaginative. I thought that was a very interesting way of doing it. So I give them props for how they did it. I thought that was fun. And then, they obviously kind of plan sort of fails. And then you get the sequence where, Simon finally attunes with the helmet, and, he kind of defeats everything. He gets his, kind of his mojo, and you start to see him get the confidence. And then Doric is, chipping away at it because, the painting fell down just to throw another wrench into their plan. So, she's able to do it. So I thought it was, like I said, I thought it was pretty interesting, the whole kind of sequence that they had from them, kind of planning it and then ultimately executing it.
It pretty much reminded me of all of those, heist movies that you saw like in previous movies, like Ocean's 11, that kind of stuff. So I'm with you. I thought it was done very nice. I thought it was well executed. The humor around it was well done. What I really like was the fact that was that scene where Simon casts an illusion where Ed's just he comes prancing into the courtyard and he starts singing and his face starts getting all distorted. And all the guards are like and then the guards are like, what the hell's going on here? And they turn around and they see the gang and they're like, after them. And then my favorite fight scene was one where Holga's in the forge, where she's just taking all these guards, and and again, it was just executed so well. Um, and just huge props to them. I mean, especially in the fact that they're in a very dangerous area where they're smelting metal. You have that danger element. Oh shit! If she makes one wrong move, she could fall in, and she'll probably have like a lead foot, literally.
Mhm.
So I thought that was very well done. And then you get to the vault, and you come to find out there's nothing in there. You know.
Yeah. Yep. It definitely was. Like I said, they kept throwing some curveballs. I was interested in it. Eventually, they figure out what was going on with it. But yeah, it was kind of, one of those things where, and I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, this is a group of people, and they even say like, they're used to failure like that. They're a group of failures. They pretty much admit it. So lo and behold, they have this great strategy, and it ends up kind of failing in essence. I mean, granted, ultimately they do overcome it, but of course, leave it to a bunch of characters that have all this working against them just to have something else work against them that they're not expecting.
Well, then that leads us to that big scene in the arena. Um, can I just say the special effects in that movie were amazing. Now I know when we reviewed The Flash, we were pretty much on the same page and saying that the special effects were subpar at best. But here, I mean, the fact that you have these walls moving around in a maze, and they're trying to survive, and they come to figure out, oh wait, we actually shouldn't be in the cage. There actually is a way to escape. What did you think about that?
It was kind of an interesting sequence, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. Like, they wanted to add another action set piece, and it was kind of interesting that they went this route for it. I didn't really have any problems with it. I thought it was a cool way to kind of see more, fantasy elements. Like you said, they had the wolf creature, whatever we want to call that, that was following them, and it was kind of interesting that it could project itself. And I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. So you kind of have this this creature that clearly seems like a very strong predator in this kind of game. I mean, it was just, I think it was kind of weird why it had to be in the movie like that. I know they're talking about these games and everything like that. Like I get why they want to do it. It just kind of felt odd, I guess. It's Dungeons and Dragons thing, so this kind of maze, I guess, fits in a little bit with what they're going for. So I mean, it was interesting. They did have the little mimic chest too, which I really liked. The treasure chest that's a mimic that comes to life and tries to eat Holga there.
Yeah.
So they definitely had, like I said, it was a good way for them to show some fantasy elements. And I agree with you. Like, I mean, it looks good overall. There were points where the CGI was kind of off. I think, like, especially when Doric like turned into that deer, like when she's escaping, when they're kind of initially trying to figure out about the treasure room that they're trying to break into. Like there was some sequences that were a bit weird, but I think overall they did a fairly good job with that. And I think they definitely had some high points with it, and eventually they figured out how to beat the game, so to speak, and that kind of allowed them to kind of continue with the story. But was kind of, like I said, they have to put something in there. Was there maybe a different choice they could have gone with? Maybe, but I think I was okay with it. But it definitely was just kind of, it felt very random.
Because I mean, the way they escape, though, George tells them basically just go inside that little Jello box, and I'll
Yes.
pull you out. I thought that was pretty brilliant, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
'Cause
no, I agree. Now, I mean, granted, like you have to kind of just hope that everything works out the way you think it's going to work out. But yes, I do think it was a creative way to help resolve that, where everyone kind of jumps in, and then she turns into like the snake comes out. So yeah, it definitely was an inventive way for them to help solve it, all things considered.
Because I mean, the whole purpose of those games really was about getting all the people into the stadium so they could be turned into revenants again.
Yes.
Which obviously is the overall goal of the Red Wizards. Um, but when they're escaping by boat after they steal Forge's boat, it Ed kind of has this epiphany where Zenek tells him, "You're not going to keep the gold. You're going to give it away to all these people." And he realizes, "Oh shit, he's right. I do have to give it away." But he doesn't. But he doesn't do it for the altruistic reasons that that you would expect. Because when Xenix tells him that, I'm thinking, oh, he's gonna have a change of heart and decide, oh, I don't need all this golden money. I have my family. But again, again in this case, it's not really that he's giving the money away, to be nice. It's to get people out of the stadium so they don't get turned into these revenants, and throws off Safina's plan.
I mean, I would still, yeah, I get what you're saying, because I mean, that is still being nice, right? I mean, his motives for doing it definitely kind of waver, but ultimately, like,
but it's not like in the Robin Hood sense, like, oh,
yes,
I'm
yeah, exactly,
okay,
yes,
yeah,
exactly, yeah. It's not, he's not doing it just for the good of the people. I mean, he's doing it for the good of the people because he's trying to save their lives. But yes, I get what you're
not
at.
not in the way that you would think.
Yes.
So that's
he's
just like
not
another,
doing it just to enhance their lives.
which then leads us to the to the final battle sequence between Safina and the crew. And really this is the moment where Simon finally comes into his own as as a confident wizard, because because the fight scene with with them having these two giant hands just going at it in the in the area. And then did Holga throw a potato at Safina, or am I misremembering that?
Well, she threw a potato at Forge when he was holding Kira kidnapped.
Oh yeah,
when,
yeah,
the,
that's
knife
right.
up against Kira, you see her throw the potato. So
yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
sequence, different potato incident.
So many potato incidences.
Yeah, yes, potatoes play an interesting role in the film. So, but as far as like kind of like that final fight sequence, I think, like I said, super imaginative. Obviously, the kind of hands thing, it's, they're coming up with something. I don't know if finding hands was maybe quite what I would envision being the most interesting thing there, but definitely threw out something that I had not seen before. And I kind of liked how everything was kind of a distraction. So Kira could put that like magic suppressing bracelet thing on.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty interesting. I thought it was like, oh, cool. A lot of this was deception. So she could be a part of that moment there at the end. Though I wonder when she technically put it on, because it's like, wouldn't the Red Wizard notice that she doesn't have any magic powers? Like, I feel like you would kind of notice, but I don't know. But it kind of was a little bit odd, but it does make sense that luckily they, had that during the maze sequence, which I guess gives more purpose to that being there, because it kind of gives you access to this, bracelet thing that suppresses the powers, which they ultimately use to defeat the Red Wizard.
Right.
So, but I thought that was, I mean, certainly a creative way of helping deal with it, and kind of helped give Kira some more urgency there as that whole final sequence kind of comes to an end.
So let me ask you this, because the whole purpose of their quest is to retrieve that stone that can resurrect people. And obviously, Ed's doing this because he wants to bring his wife back, but he comes to the realization, there would be no point in doing it. Holga's pretty much been the surrogate mother to Kira, so I got to bring her back. What did you think about the overall mission for trying to get that stone? Because Forge is like, oh yeah, your dad's just making it up. It's really just to get himself rich. He's not really doing it for you. He's just doing it for himself.
Yep. Yeah, and I have to admit, like, that is in a movie that's called Dungeons and Dragons, I was blown away by that, because I mean, it does make a ton of sense, right? Like, if you really think about it, obviously, we know that Ed has a much stronger relationship with the wife, right? Because really, for Kira, she never really knew the mom, right? Like, she was a baby when the whole incident happened. So it was like a really powerful moment where he has to make this choice. And like you pointed out, Holga's been the surrogate mother. She's been like her rock this whole time. Her whole like real life has been growing up with her. So even though, we really empathize with Chris Pine's character and what he's trying to do with the whole thing, that he wants to bring his wife back, at the end of the day, he wants to, give Kira her mom, and really the mom was all good the whole time. So I mean, it is like I think something that you really have to think about. It's not very black and white. Like, you're kind of like, holy shit, this brings up a very good point. Like, bringing your wife back is obviously a big thing, but this Kira doesn't know this person, right? Her true mom is Holga. So, I think it is one of those things where it adds so much weight to the decision that's like, dang, like, that's a very hard thing to decide upon, right? Because if he does it, he's doing it to bring his wife back. So is it selfish for him to want to do that, right? I mean, there is a little bit of that, of course, for him. He wants to bring his wife back. Like, he obviously had a much stronger relationship. They've been around a lot longer. But Kira just knows Holga. That's it. So, it really was, to me, a powerful choice, or a hard choice to make. And like I said, I'm surprised that they did that so well in something that's just, I was expected to be some schlocky fantasy thing. And,
Right.
and there is some really strong emotional beats to it.
And it worked quite well too, because it does make you think, and obviously, at some level you're thinking to yourself, Ed's gonna bring his wife back so so he can have a family again, but obviously, as with all these tropes, he comes to realize, oh, I've had my family the entire time, and yes, that can be a bit hackneyed, but at the same time, it kind of works in this movie, because this entire time that they've been doing this together, they pretty much have become a family, even if they, especially when we're on that beach, and he goes down to sit, and he goes to that little rock to sit down, and everybody just goes over and they sit down. You kind of get this feeling, oh, they're realizing that in spite of the fact that they say they don't need each other, they kind of do need each other, and it makes them stronger for that.
Yes.
So how did you feel about Forge's ending? Because I thought it was pretty satisfying.
Yes, I agree. I think it was just kind of a nice way for everything to go out. Like I said, I mean, he's a con man to the end, always looking for riches, always doing what he wanted to do. So yes, it did feel very fitting with how everything transpired with that. So yeah, I'll give them some props for that. That was, I think, a good way for him to meet his demise.
And what's even funnier is the fact he tries to pull the same the same trick as from earlier in the movie, and they bricked over the window. And I'm like, yes, that's what they should do. They should learn from the mistakes from the beginning of the movie so they don't repeat again.
Yep.
And it's even funnier as Jonathan's like, oh, not this again. So just a few notes that I've noticed, a few references. When they're going over the map, you get a very quick shot of it, but you see Kelvin's cairn. I thought that was a pretty good reference to the Star Trek movies that Chris Pine was in, because obviously, because as a Trekkie myself, the 3 Star Trek movies with Chris Pine are known as the Kelvin timeline. So that's a completely different timeline from what you would see in like the main series. So I thought that was a pretty nice reference. And then they keep mentioning Baldur's Gate, and obviously Baldur's Gate is a reference to the video game. So I thought that was a pretty nice touch. So all these little references to all these like different movies and different video games that they kind of exist. And also too, again, this is me just being weird. I did notice that Tom Morello made a cameo appearance. The guitarist from Rage Against the Machine. He plays one of the attendants at that at the game. So I thought that was a pretty nice touch too. Did you have any particularly favorite scenes? Anything that stood out to you that you wanted to give an honorable mention to?
I mean, just like I think they kind of throw out like a lot of fun Dungeons and Dragons stuff. So like some of the spells that got utilized, are kind of taken directly from that world. So I thought that was really interesting. The mimic that I mentioned, I thought was a really cool addition in there. I mean, it just kind of felt like a true rendition of that. So I think it did a very fun job with that. I think probably, I kind of talked about the Suikots a little bit earlier, but I think for me, like a lot of the Doric sequences, where I think were a ton of fun, where she's kind of shape shifting and turning all these different animals. Like I just thoroughly enjoyed just seeing a lot of that stuff get depicted. So I definitely give them props for coming up with some really cool imaginative sequences. I think, them, getting the helm was a ton of fun. The graveyard scene was a ton of fun. So, I think there just was a ton of these moments that I got some good laughs out of, which, I mean, I think just creates this really fun experience. Like, it was just a fun romp from beginning to end. And I give the movie some big props for not being the dumpster fire that the previous Dungeons and Dragons things, because everything was working against this, right? It's trying to depict something that is I think well known, and I think gaining a lot more popularity now. Like we see a lot more people getting into stuff like this. So it has this kind of popularity getting bigger and bigger, and it had every right to flop. And I know financially probably didn't pull out the numbers it wanted, but at least from a movie standpoint, was just a ton of fun. And I think they had a lot of fun sequences in that. I think one thing that kind of bugged me the whole time and was Kira's character. So the only thing I just wanted to talk about that really briefly was just she just felt like really gullible, right? Like she just seemed to like eat up anything that Forge said. And I get he's a con man, and I know like like he's really like a master of manipulating people, but always just felt so weird. It's like, wow, you like trust this guy really quickly, and like your father that you've known for a long time, and Holga, that's like your two parents are telling you like, hey, this isn't the truth, or he's lying to you, and she kind of eats it up too easily. I'm like, I mean, I could kind of understand it, but it's like, I don't know. For me, it was a little bit hard for me to grasp, and I just felt like that was kind of like a lame part in the movie, that they kind of create this kind of like tension between Kira and both Ed and Holga, and I just didn't really feel to earn. I think that was just kind of one of my, I would say, kind of minor nitpicks with the movie. Was I think they probably could have done that a little bit differently, or maybe handled or addressed that a little bit differently. What did you think about that? Did you pick up on that, or am I just being a little too much?
I mean, I did, but I'm a bit more forgiving just because of the fact that one, she's a kid. So obviously, when when you're younger, you're gonna be a bit more gullible.
Very true.
When it comes to that stuff. But also, too, I mean, think about it. I mean, Forge pretty much raised her while her dad was in prison. So so obviously Kira wasn't wasn't really privy to any of those circumstances. So I mean, yeah, Forge is a con artist, so anything he might have told her was BS. But to a kid, if you weren't there, if you didn't know, if you didn't know the context or what was going on, if that's what your surrogate father tells you, I mean, obviously you're going to believe that, because they were there. They're telling this to you as fact, and you're really not getting any pushback from anybody else until your dad and your surrogate mother comes along and tries to set you straight. So yeah, I did get that vibe. A part of me kind of feels like, what, he is your dad. I mean, if he's telling you this, there really isn't that much of a motivation for him to lie. But at the same time, it's like, well, it's been this many number of years since she's seen her dad, and she's pretty much been around Forge for for that length of time. I can sort of be a bit more understanding to as to why she would readily believe Forge, or at least or at least be a bit more inclined to what Forge is saying than what her dad's been saying. You know what I
That's
mean?
fair. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Nope, that definitely I think it's for me, and I think the age thing is maybe a little bit weird for me too, because it's like I can't really like is she a teenager? Is she younger? Like I think that's maybe something that's also throwing me off is like it's kind of hard for me to kind of like tell. Maybe I'm giving her maybe a little bit more years on her than she really is. I think um it seems like I just looked it up. She was actually supposed to be 11. So I do agree with you. I think I kind of pictured her maybe being closer to being kind of like maybe very early teens. So
Yeah,
like I would think of her
that's
maybe
the
being a
vibe
little
I
bit more
got.
understanding. But yeah, I guess with her being 11, she would have been, maybe 9. Because I think it's 2 years they've been in the prison, right? I think that was the second
Yeah,
year. Yeah.
yeah.
So if she kind of, he left her when she's 9, I can be a little bit more understanding to kind of her character and why she would be a bit more I guess kind of
Naive.
yeah, thank you, there you go, should be a little bit more naive to that type of stuff, so that seems fair.
So, what's her overall score for this movie?
Yeah, so I mean I would give it, let's see here, I'm gonna say I'm gonna give it 3.8 out of 5 eight-sided die. So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I thought it was overall good. I had a ton of fun with it. Like I said, it does nothing that I haven't seen before, right? So, I mean, if you're going into it like, oh, I'm going to see something totally new, it doesn't do that. But I think what it does is it does everything really well. I enjoyed the characters, most of them. I think a lot of the kind of missions that they do are very imaginative, really sticks out in the world that they're creating. So I just thought it was a fun ride where I think if maybe the villain was a bit better, or maybe if we got a little bit more out of some of the side characters, I think it could have really stuck out more. But I think it does a lot of things really well. So yeah, that's my grade. Did I say 3.8? 3.8 out
Yeah,
of 5. I might have just changed it now, but that's what I'm going with.
I'm gonna say 3.8 on my end as well, and it's pretty much for the same reasons. But
Oh,
I
you can't
also
pick the same thing as me. Nope, change your grade.
all right. Well, I'll say 3.81 then. Um,
Okay, fair. All right, so you liked it a little bit more than me. Okay.
yeah, and I'll say this. I mean, considering that they took a lot of classic movie tropes and they executed them very well, I thought that was pretty impressive, and the special effects I thought were phenomenal. And I really enjoyed the performance that Chris Pine gave because
Yeah.
because he plays such an in-depth character. This guy who's trying his best to try to make up for all the mistakes of his life, and failing spectacularly, but never giving up. And he gives that speech too, when they're on the beach. And I'll say this too, even with characters like Simon and Doric, even though we can shit on them for being one dimensional or not having very strong motivations, in the end I still found myself rooting for them
Yeah.
because there's this connectivity that you have with them, and you just feel like yes, I mean, we may not agree with their reasons, or we may find their reasons pretty weak, but to them, I mean, that's reason enough to go out and do what they do. I'm also just struck by the fact of how mature some of those scenes were.
Yeah.
Because you kind of get the feeling, oh, it's just going to be silly, it's just going to be hackneyed, they're just going to have like these one-off lines, but no, they approached it with a lot of depth. They, especially with that scene where Ed has to decide whether he's going to revive his wife or Holga. That is a very mature choice to make. I mean, these are decisions you usually see in movies like Sophie's Choice, and
Mhm.
and the reason for it, we mentioned earlier, that's pretty moving because yes, I mean, you could have the chance to bring your wife back, but at that point you're thinking about yourself, you're not really thinking about others. and the fact that that Ed made the choice to revive Holga, it kind of shows a development in Ed's thinking to show that he's no longer thinking about himself. He's thinking about what's best for Kira, and Kira really doesn't need the mother that she doesn't know. It's the mother that she does know.
Yep.
I will say that I really would like to see more of Forge, because I thought he was a pretty fun character. Safina, I could give or take. I kind of felt like if you had taken Safina out of the movie, it still would have been a pretty interesting romp, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah. So yours is 3.8, mine's 3.81. Well, before we sign off, was there anything else you wanted to add about that movie? Anything else that stood out to you?
No, but I just want to reiterate, like, I think you hit the nail on the head with Chris Pine and the way he really depicted that character. And I think it speaks a lot, like, he's a bard, right? So, like, he has this great charisma about him. And, like, he really knew how to bring it together. If you really listen to what he says, like, the guy, granted, he is doing it out of, some selfish reasons, but, like, he's trying to get the best out of everyone he's working with. So, like, he's always, giving Simon, a lot of pep talks, he's trying to help out with everything. So, I think it is kind of funny that the character that you would expect to have a lot of charisma in it ends up being the character that has a lot of charisma in it. So I think granted, he does play a little bit on the dead end of things, but I did enjoy his way of depicting things, and I think it worked really well in the movie.
Excellent. Well, and on that note, we're going to go ahead and end the episode. But remember to like, comment, subscribe, and if there are any movies or TV shows you'd like us to review, please put them down in the comment section below, and we will do our best to get around to watching those movies. But for now, we'll call it a day. And thank you so much for watching. Ciao.